This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon, and we're going to talk about the ocean today. Hey, let's talk about the ocean, but from the perspective of shit that we can't control. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing. So I mean, I was talking to someone today around meditation, and the idea that they can't meditate because they can't stop their thoughts. The thoughts just keep fucking going and going and going and running. 1,000 thoughts, I think they said. I asked them if they counted, and they said no, because that'd be another thought. Of course. But at least then you would know whether you were exaggerating or not, right? Because this is really important. Because when we talk globally, as in global language, like all the time, everywhere, very global, we induce a state. And so when we go, my brain's, racing 1,000,000 miles an hour, it's got 1,000 things going on. When we say that, it actually induces a state of being somewhat, I'm going to use my terms here, but panic or anxious or the brain just being somewhat out of control, right? Whereas when we can be a little bit more detailed and go, well, hang on a sec, how many thoughts are actually going on? And we start to count, we get a bit more detail, we move out of that state-induced coma, right, that we're actually in. It's the same when we say everything's shit, I can't believe everything's fucked up, I can't do anything right. That sort of language is inducing a state of shame, or maybe it's of anger, maybe, or sadness, and there's a positive intention behind it. It's going to be different for each person, but it's very interesting. And so one of the key things here is, like, I can't stop my thoughts, so, like, meditation is, like, just so fucking hard, I can't do it, right? Which is the comparison, just assuming that everybody that meditates well, or whatever the term is going to just stop their thoughts. But the whole thing of emptying your mind, right? And this is why being mindful is kind of the opposite of what people set out to do. It's actually being mindless or mind empty, right? It's this empty state of mind rather than filling the mind, right? I want to be in a mindful state. It's like, well, just make sure you keep minding that then, because that way you will fill your mind and it will be full. But this mindless state, right, is where we actually step into somewhat being the observer. And I know I've talked about the observer a lot, and I'll continue to talk about the observer a lot. But the thoughts coming into our mind, we cannot control. Now, there's people that argue against that, and I'm just talking from general population, sitting down, learning to meditate, learning to see their thoughts. Thoughts coming into your mind, you're not in a position to control. They're just going to come in. What we are in a position to control is what we deem, right, to be true. What we deem to be correct and real, compared to what we deem not to be true and what's not real, right? And that's the first stage, the ability to just step back and observe the thoughts as they come up, rather than being the thoughts, right? And when we can do this, we start to teach ourselves to step away from identifying as the thoughts, and then also being in this what's called first-person perspective of always like getting pulled left, right, and center emotionally, or with our negative thoughts or positive thoughts, or being higher motivation then crashing all the way down. A lot of the time people are so hell-bent on just identifying as their thoughts, whether they realize it or not, that their thoughts dictate their actual physiology. Which they do, by the way, but it'll just run, and the person ends up being so fucking tired, but then they lay in bed, they go, I can't sleep, and therefore continue to embed that command so they won't sleep. It's quite interesting. So our ability to just step back, right? Think of thoughts like the ocean. And rather than being in the ocean, trying to stop the waves. That's what stopping your thoughts is like. You're trying to fucking stop you're in the ocean, you're stopping the waves, right? They can't wave anymore. You can't do that. The idea is not to be in the ocean trying to stop the waves. The idea is sitting on the beach, watching the waves, right? Because you're not the wave, hey, right? So I'm trying to stop the thoughts, which is, by the way, it's a fucking thought. And so when you're trying to stop the ocean, it's like, it doesn't work that way. It'll just let the waves be. And then after a while, you're able to sit on the beach and just let the waves and the ocean be and do whatever the fucking waves and ocean does. And you stop identifying as this, 1,000 wave machine that can't stop waving, can't stop oceaning, so to speak. And this is a beautiful analogy, right? Because at that stage, you're no longer trying to grab water. You're just letting water be, and you become the observer. And then slowly, and with more practice, things slow down. Things quieten. The waves end up kind of getting smaller. Although it doesn't really matter, they just seem smaller to you. And when I say waves, I'm talking thoughts. And then your mind gets less busy and less full, right? And you start to move into being more mindless, right? Or this emptiness of mind is probably a better way to put it. And this is the next stage. This is a further stage of meditation and awarenessing and all of this. And it's because we're able to step back and we start to remove all these filters, right? Because if we're sitting there and just observing and then getting frustrated with how much our brain's thinking and just running and all that sort of shit, like that in itself is the thought. We're now back in the ocean trying to stop the ocean, right? Whereas when we step back, well, to add to that first, because when we get frustrated and we start to judge it, this is shit, I'm shit at this, that's all the egoic structures, even though we're trying to step outside of the egoic structures, right? The egoic structures being judgment, right? Good and bad is an egoic structure. It doesn't mean it's not useful. Egoic structures are very useful. It just depends whether it has us or we have them. When we do have them, but it still goes back to old mate Carl Jung's quote of, do people have ideas or do ideas have people? And there are a fucking shit ton of people who are walking around and they're just had by an idea. They're had by a thought. They don't own them. They don't own their life, right? Their thoughts own their life. Their thoughts own their perception of it, and they can't change. But they don't fucking want to change because that would mean that they've been wrong for so long, right? But this is a really interesting thing. I actually shared this on Instagram today on my story. It was a quote by funny enough, another quote, right, by what's his name, Wim Hof, and he goes, "What I can do, anybody can do. It's only training. It's only awakening." Because it's already there. Now, if you don't know who Wim Hof is, he's a fucking absolute amazing, phenomenal human being with a magnitude of world records, but like really interesting world records, like running a marathon in the Arctic and then, barefoot, basically, and then running it in the fucking Nevada desert barefoot sort of thing. So it's worth having a look at his holding his breath underwater. Check out Wim Hof. But either way, what I can do, anybody can do. It's only training. It's only awakening. Because it's already there. So this is the whole idea when people are like, oh, I'm more spiritual, or this person's more spiritual, or no one's more spiritual than anyone else. Everything in let's call it in the spirit sphere, if you want to think of it in that sense, is already there. We already have access to it. There's just shit in the way. And like he said just then, it's only training, right? And it's practice. You ever hear me talk about practice? I'm talking about training and practicing your practices. And over time, it becomes awakening. But that awakening is already there. That observing is already there. It just, we stop identifying as all the bullshit in the way, which is often what's in our way, right? And we start to step back and observe it from, the observer standpoint. But that has always been there. It's just when we're ready to step into it. And some of us, just takes time for everyone, really. You can't escape the work to get there. There's no fucking switch. It's work, right? That's Wim Hof. I love it. I shared it. What I can do, anybody can do. What I can do, anybody can do. It's only training. It's only awakening. Because it's already there. And on that note, I'm going to finish. I thought that was a good one. Team, on this lovely day, if you found this podcast beneficial and you think you know someone else who would also find it beneficial, it would mean the world to me and Petey. If you want to see a photo of Petey, I posted a very happy photo of him on Instagram today. You should totally check it out. But either way, at DD Nix. Anyway, share it with a friend that you think would also find it beneficial. If you haven't already, jump on Facebook, search Mood Prep Community and join the community there. We still have tickets and still early bird. It's on to the second phase for the Mood Prep Seminar in September, the 21st and 22nd. I would love to see you there. If you've got a value out of these podcasts, you're going to get so much value out of that weekend. There's more details on my website under seminars. It's davenixon.com.au. That's me done for today, guys. Until tomorrow, you know the deal. Peace and pizza. Kick today in the dick and slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.
Happiness to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.